the redeemed of the Lord say so, because the world needs to know. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, because the world needs to know. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, because the world needs to know. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, because the world needs to know.
Greetings. Welcome to Say So, where we talk about it, whatever it is. Because what you do not know can hurt you or someone that you know and love. So let's get to the root. For today's episode, we're going to continue in the same vein of soul trauma healing. And this is part 2. And we're going to jump right in with the mark of a damaged soul. So as we go through this, I want you to really look into your own heart, look into your own experiences, look into your own history and background, and or those that you know and love, and see if there is any of these marks of a damaged soul. Because once you identify what the issue is, then we can begin to move towards the solution to the issue. So there are a total of 9 things that we can find, or 9 marks of a damaged soul. And just to review, all of this information comes from Ryan Lestrange's book entitled Healing Soul Trauma. So we're going to go forth. Now, as I said, there are 9 marks of a damaged soul. And the first one is self-loathing. Now, you might be asking yourself, what is self-loathing? What does that mean? What does it look like? So, self-loathing is basically a constant belief or feeling of worthlessness, failure, inadequacy, or incompetence. All right. So you basically feel like you're not good enough and you're undeserving of anything good in life. Have you ever met someone like that? Do you work with someone like that? Or maybe attend church or are in class beside someone who their statements just make you feel that they do not feel very good about themselves. Now, self-loathing is connected to past trauma and pain. So it came from somewhere. It didn't just crop up all of a sudden, right? So these are the sources or the roots behind self-loathing. Now, it comes through a lack of affirmation. So this individual or these individuals were not affirmed, and it could be from childhood, or it could be in the current relationship that they're in, or just basically in their life. They have not received enough affirmation about themselves. Now, the key to healing self-loathing, or the issue of self-loathing, is to come into an understanding that you are a new creation, which the Bible says, as well as the radical love of the Father. When you understand and know how much the Father loves you, then you understand that you're not inadequate. You cannot be. You cannot be incompetent. You cannot be worthless, which puts me in the mind of the song by Anthony Brown. And some of the lyrics say, you thought, he's talking to God, you thought I was worth saving. You thought I was worth keeping. You know, basically, you sacrificed your life so I could be free. If you're worthless, then why would Heavenly Father, Father God, sacrifice the life of his only begotten son if you meant nothing, if you have no value, if you have no purpose, right? Also, the second of the 9 marks of a damaged soul is limited dreams. Right? So what is a dream? If they are to be limited, then what in general is a dream? You might be asking. So a dream is a cherished aspiration. It's an ambition or an idea. Anything cherished is nurtured. Anything cherished is precious to you. So this is saying limited dreams. So you don't have very many, or maybe you in and of yourself limit your dreams and tell yourself that you can't, you won't, and all of these things. You shouldn't, what have you. Limited dreams is an act of self-protection. You basically refuse to aspire or reach for better. And this may be because, once again, a lot of these are interconnected. This may be because there's an element of self-loathing where you feel like you're worthless and you're not worthy of anything good in life. So why reach for better? Why try for better? Or what have you? It's also empowered by a sense of inadequacy. So once again, there's that word, inadequacy, from past disappointments. Also, it's rooted in fear and rejection. Right? So ask yourself, have you had any encounters or experiences with fear and or rejection? Because it's basically saying that I don't deserve better, so I'm not going to try for better. I'm not going to strive for better. I'm not going to believe for better. And it puts me in the mind of an unhealthy or toxic relationship where, but you could have a person that may say, hey, I wish my husband, I wish my significant other, my boyfriend, my fiance, whomever would treat me the way that this person treats you or treats them or whatever, or what have you. And they are choosing to stay in that relationship simply because their dreams are limited and they have self-loathing. So they don't feel like they're worthy of another individual that would actually treat them better. In some aspects, they may feel like I deserve this and I'm not going to do better. So why even try? Why even think that or conceive in my mind that I can do better than what I'm doing now? Okay. The third mark of a damaged soul is waiting for the good to end. All right. So this is a constant sense of dread and gloom, envisioning and expecting the worst. It's also connected to a false identity. So it's not really your identity, but you believe that it is, or you have received and embraced that it is. This is your lot in life, so to speak. Also, it's connected to the spirit of heaviness, which we're going to talk a little bit about later, as well as it's important to know and to note that this must be broken. Basically, the idea, the concept, the perception of you're just waiting for the bottom to fall out, right? I can remember experiencing things like this. And I would always feel like I'm the one that's going to take one for the team. If anything bad is going to happen, it's going to happen to me. Now, I don't ride roller coasters anymore, but when I was a teen, I did. And I can remember literally being on the roller coaster. We're going up the hill, about to descend down, and usually there's a steep drop and everything is going so fast and whatever, or what have you, and praying not to fall out. Because in my mind, I really thought and believed that if anybody is going to fall, it's going to be me. So that's a real life example of waiting for the good to end, expecting the worst. Okay. Now, it also gives way to the self-fulfilling prophecy. All right. Which means basically you have an expectation or a belief, which basically influences your behavior that causes the belief or the expectation to come true. For example, if I was to fall out of the, roller coaster or what have you, it would have been because I secretly inwardly or what have you, consciously believe that it was possible, right? So that's what we mean by the self-fulfilling prophecy. The New Testament book of Mark, chapter 11, verse 23, teaches us that you can have what you say. Previously, it talks about, in that same verse, it talks about speaking to the mountain and say being removed and cast into the sea. And the end sentence, or the latter part of the verse, part B, is saying basically you have what you say. And sometimes we don't even have to say it or verbalize it out of our mouths, but we're believing it, we're pondering on it, we're fearing it. And actually there's no evidence that it will come to pass or manifest. It's almost like worrying about something that never happens, never even has an intent to happen, but you're worrying about it, right? Now, number 4 mark of a damaged soul is blame shifting. All right. Now, this is connected to the victim mentality. Also, to a mature soul or inner child. The 4th mark of a damaged soul is blame shifting. All right. Now, this is connected to the victim mentality as well as the immature soul or an inner child as a result of childhood trauma or addiction. Now, this requires both healing and deliverance. And it makes me think of pointing the finger at others and avoiding responsibility. And we talked about what pointing the finger does and looks like in the previous episode of soul trauma. But basically, it puts in mind where I knew of a family. They had an ailing grandmother or what have you. All of the children and or grandchildren, as opposed to coming up with solutions, if anything went wrong with the grandmother, they would blame, shift, and point the finger at each other and bring up everything that they did, which is irrelevant because whatever has happened to the grandmother, if she falls sick or whatever, or falls or anything, any ailment or affliction as a result of maybe not being supervised, or somebody didn't come over when they said they would, or somebody didn't check in or whatever, what have you, you pointing the finger and saying, well, I did this, you didn't do that. And I did this and you didn't do that. That's not helpful. So that's just an example of blame shifting. You're shifting the blame to someone else. In doing so, you're avoiding the responsibility that you have. Well, maybe I should have called. Maybe I should have checked as opposed to going straight home. Maybe I should have dropped by or stopped by or whatever, what have you. That's an example of accepting responsibility. Okay. Now we're going to move to number 5, the 5th mark of a damaged soul. It's constant need for approval, affirmation, and attention. Now, this is rooted in the spirit of rejection. It's manifesting an evidence of soul trauma. So if you know of someone that has an issue with rejection, when they're rejected, they completely change on you. They completely shift their mind, their attitude, their personality, all of these things. Then that's letting you know the number one, that's a spirit that is manifesting, and there is some soul trauma. Okay. Everyone needs words of affirmation. That's important. Everyone needs love, and everyone needs positive attention. That's important. That's natural. That's normal. But it becomes abnormal when it's an unrealistic expectation, and it also needs to be addressed and healed. So they have to always be the center of attention. They have to monopolize the conversation. They have to one up everybody. So if you say, I made straight A's, they have to say, well, I made straight A pluses with no A minuses or whatever, or what have you. So they have to, turn the conversation to themselves because they need affirmation. They need to feel loved. They need all of the attention, right? It also can be rooted in the orphan spirit. It's also important to know and to note that in episodes 62 through 64, we deal specifically with the orphan spirit, what it is, what it looks like, what comes along with it, what it's rooted in, what have you. We also talked about the difference between the orphan spirit and the spirit of sonship because they're polar opposites, right? You can find the differences in episode 65 through 66. And also, you can find out what the spirit of sonship is, what it should look like. How do I walk that out? How do I know that I'm accepted in the beloved? How do I know that I'm his daughter? How do you know that you're his son or daughter, whatever sex you are? Now, that's found in episodes 67 through 68. The 6th of the 9 marks of a damaged soul is controlling and fear tendencies. Now, this is often rooted in rejection as well, or a painful experience, right? Now, control becomes a personal safeguard with overcompensating. And this is basically, once again, self-protection. It's a self-protective mindset. It needs to be broken and cast out with the restoration of the Father's love. As the Bible says, that the man is the head of his household, right? God is above the man, the wife, the children, pets, everything that follows underneath that, right? That's the order. But this is man being the head versus there being a female head. So either the man runs the house or his wife runs the house, okay? So in female-headed households, when there is a male present, basically the mindset or the thought process is, if I'm in control, then you can't hurt me or control me. So basically then a power struggle ensues. And we see this a lot in domestic violence situations where there is power and control. Who's going to be in control? Who's the strongest? Who's going to win the argument? Who's the most forceful? Who's the most aggressive? All of those things. The 7th of the 9 marks of a damaged soul is the victim mindset. Now, it's caused by not accepting responsibility. Once again, these are intertwined. They all go hand in hand for the current status in life. So it's everybody else's fault. You can blame your parents, you can blame your grandparents, you can blame your great grandparents, you can blame your siblings, you can blame your teacher, or you can blame your boss. You blame everyone else except yourself because you're the victim. You're always the victim in every situation. You have no power. You are always, the underdog or whatever, what have you, right? Now, what this does is it creates emotional stagnation. It's almost like being numb and paralysis. All right. So one of the things, it is demonic and it keeps you stuck in self-pity. So pitiful me. Nobody loves me. Everybody rejects me. Nobody listens to me. Nobody pays me any attention. I'm worthless. Nobody, I'm not worthy of this sort of quality of life. I can't be a homeowner. I can't own property. I can't pay my bills on time. I can't have enough food. I can't this and I can't that. You always, you're the victim. Okay. In your mind. Now, this is blame shifting as well, or includes blame shifting. And also, as I mentioned in the previous episode, the 3 P's, the pity, party, posse. Now, this talks about self-pity, but also when you want somebody to join the party, you find yourself being around and drawn to individuals that are in the same situation as you, or just as broken as you, or more so broken. So you guys can compare your wounds. Okay. And that's the one upping too. If you say, oh, well, I got shot in the head, or whatever. Well, I was in a coma for a year. And there may be some element of truth to this, but sometimes the person just wants attention. So if everybody is focusing on you and your story, then they have to say something to get them to focus on them, right? Now, this also reminds me and includes self-loathing. It's important to know and to note that relationships are an indication of how you feel about yourself, because those that you attract in your life are going to treat you based upon how you treat yourself or lack thereof. Once again, with the self-loathing, you feel like you're undeserving anyway. So you're going to surround yourself with other people that feel the same way. And this makes me think of when there are substance abuse circles. Like, for example, you have a certain amount of, if you're in high school or an adult or whenever or whatever, you have a certain amount of people that okay, if I want to get drunk, I'm going to hang with these people. If I want to get high, I'm going to hang with these people. Or if I want to get drunk and high, I'm going to hang with this person or these people or whatever or what have you. And like I said, it's basically because they help you to lick your wounds. You can be the victim. You can talk about how things are so bad. I don't have money to pay my bills. I'm about to be evicted and it's just not my fault. My landlord is unfair and they know I got children. I can't feed my children. I can't this and I can't that. That's that victim mentality. And you're not taking responsibility. Maybe you spent your money, or maybe this money that you're using to purchase alcohol and drugs would be better spent, saved, or used to feed your children. But you're the victim always. So that's your mentality. Number 8 of the 9 marks of a damaged soul is unhealthy overachiever. All right. So basically, it's saying that these people are born to lead, to build, and to achieve, which is not a bad thing. Yet it's rooted in rejection and low self-worth. So you're overachieving. You've got to be the first at everything. You've got to make A's. You got to have all the trophies. You got to have all the certificates or whatever or what have you. And it's also tied into a lack of positive affirmation. There's that affirmation limit or lack. There again, somewhere in childhood, you did not receive the affirmation that you needed, that you deserved, or whatever, or what have you. So now you're overcompensating with all of these things, these medals, these trophies, these plaques on the wall, or whatever, or what have you. And it's basically because you don't feel good about yourself. You don't feel worthy. So you could have a room full of Oscars. You could have a room full of the Golden Globe Awards or whatever, or what have you. But that's still not enough. You can have a room full of, gold records or whatever have you. It's still not enough. And that puts me in the mind of celebrities, because each and every year, each and every award ceremony, their goal is to bring home as many awards as possible. But once you've actually gotten your first Oscar, what difference does it make if you get 10 more? Like, typically the first time you achieve that is the biggest, boost of what adrenaline or whatever you get, self-confidence, whatever, what have you. Now, what difference is it going to make that you get 19 more of them? But that's just never being satisfied. And we know that the Bible talks about, Paul says he's learned in whatever situation he finds himself therewith to be content. So if you only have 1 Oscar versus 20, you're content because, you've achieved that. But for overachievers, it's never enough. More less is more. They have to get all that they can, and they're not satisfied no matter how many they get, because there's still more to get in their mind and mentality. Now, number 9 of the 9 marks of a damaged soul is lack of personal value. Now, this mindset allows people to use, abuse, and degrade you because you don't deem yourself worthy. It creates a toxic world of ongoing emotional pain. So it's like a cycle, and a lack of personal boundaries. And it requires healing from past rejection and abuse. So basically, it's the example that came to mind was like being called out of your name and you remain silent. So that means because you're not saying anything that you're in agreement with what you've been called, right? So you're silently consenting by saying or doing nothing. Then you basically said, this is okay. All right. And it's equivalent to, even in crimes, you can be an accessory to a crime simply because you didn't say anything, you did nothing to stop it, you didn't leave or call the police or do anything to intervene whatsoever. And you can be charged as an accessory to the fact because it would not have happened or continued or maybe even been fully executed had you done something to intervene, said something or whatever or what have you. Now, so this with boundaries makes me think of how, it's very common for us to say what you're not going to do is this, that, and the other. That's stating a boundary. Like what you're not going to do is disrespect me. What you're not going to do is call me out my name. What you're not going to do is curse me out. What you're not going to do is raise your voice, whatever, what have you. That's boundaries. That's letting people know you can only come this far with her because you cannot, continue with this type of behavior or whatever, or this type of verbal abuse or whatever, or what have you. So we're going to move to power tools. All right. So some of the power tools they mention here are word curses. All right. And then they give the opposite of word curses, which is speaking blessings. Also, curses from childhood and how those, can have a lasting impact on the individual if not intervened, if or not replaced with the truth of Christ and all of that the word of God says about you, as well as traumatic memories. So let's dig right in. And here's the thing. Think about a regular tool and a power tool. A regular tool for me would be something like a screwdriver. Think about how much work you can do with one single screwdriver versus a drill. A drill is a power tool. So that means there's electricity that there's usually a motor, like you could and you'll be done driving in a nail or a screw or whatever, screwing something in. Yet with a screwdriver, it's going to take you some time. So these are things that go straight to the heart that really do the most damage. Like I said, when you think about a power tool versus something that you're doing manually, that could take some time. Okay. These basically go do the most damage. All right. Most quickly. All right. So we're going to go right into them. It's important to know that by words, we build, we create, we establish, we release the power of God through our words. And as we said in the previous episode, what are you building? What type of relationships are you building? What are you building in your life? Is it negative or positive? Okay, it's important to know and to note that the enemy establishes his evil plans through words as well. And they're entitled word curses. Some examples of word curses is you are dumb, you are smart, you are slow, you are something like that, something negative, of course. You'll never be as good as your sister. You'll never be overachiever or an overcomer. You'll never be better than what you are right now. You always mess up. You always fail. You never do things right or whatever, what have you. So those are just some words and some ways in which there are word curses. And really it's a lie. Like, for example, if somebody says you always wake up late, the moment you wake up on time or with the alarm clock, guess what? You can't always is all encompassing, like every time. You never take out the trash. If they took out the trash one time, guess what? That's null and void because never means never ever. But if they've done it at least once, then guess what? You cannot rightfully use the term never or always. Okay. You might be thinking, what is a word curse? All right, so it's a solemn utterance, which means it comes from your mouth, intended to invoke a supernatural power to inflict harm or punishment on someone or something. So it's important to know and to note that word curses typically follow or come along with some sort of anger. It could be a disagreement or argument or whatever or what have you. So the person that's spewing this venom is typically angry, they're irritated, they're frustrated, they're stressed or whatever, what have you. Now, a word curse is a demonic proclamation in a person that releases the intent of the enemy over your life through something that they speak. Okay, so they're spoken. It's important to know and to know that you don't have to hear someone speak about you for the word curse to be enacted or whatever or what have you. That's why the word of God says, not only does it say no weapon formed against you shall prosper. You're more than a conqueror through Christ that loves you. But it also says every tongue that rise against you in judgment, God will condemn. You don't have to be there to hear it for it to rise against you, for someone to speak about you. Think about gossiping and backbiting. You don't necessarily have to be there. And sometimes you may hear about it through a third party. Oh, this person said this or they said that or whatever, what have you, rumors and all of this stuff. But you may not have necessarily been there, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't been released out into the atmosphere and something is being built with that. A foundation is being set and something is going to be built on that foundation if and when that word curse is not destroyed, is not cast down. Okay? Now, it's important to know and to note that everything in the spirit realm is created and established by words, as we previously alluded to. God creates with words. Think about how God created the world. Literally, he spoke it into existence. The enemy establishes demonic powers and influence by words as well. Prophets and prophetic people release spiritual utterances, which means it comes from our mouth, to build, create, and establish. So if we can do that, from the kingdom of light, the kingdom of darkness is going to attempt to do the exact same thing by speaking negatively in word curses, right? So some of the scriptures that are going to be found in the description below are found in Proverbs chapter 18, verses 6 through 8, right? So basically it talks about the lips that bring strife. It talks about the mouth that calls for blows. It talks about a fool's mouth in his ruin, the words of a whisper that are like daunting morsels, and they go down into the innermost parts of the body. So basically it's talking about piercing words. It's talking about words that are meant to destroy and meant to be destructive, right? It's important to know and to know that wisdom dictates sound speech, and wise men and women choose their words with care, which puts me in remembrance of how I always teach my son to carefully select what comes out of your mouth. And you do that because select means that you carefully choose as being the best or most suitable. So that means if you have to choose, if you have to select, that means you have options. It can be a blessing or it can be a curse word, blessing word, whatever, or what have you, blessings that are spoken. So it's important to know and to note that. And the book of Proverbs is actually known as the book of wisdom because it tells you a lot of do's and don'ts. It tells you the difference between being wise and being foolish or whatever, or what have you. So scriptural backing is found in Proverbs chapter 15, verse 2, that says, the tongue of the wise makes knowledge acceptable, but the mouth of fools spouts folly. All right, there's another one in Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21 that says, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit. Now, it's important to know and to note that you can speak words of blessings to bless your family, bless your children, bless your lives, and those around you by the words of your mouth. Proclamations are powerful, right? And the power of blessing is powerful. Now, my question, this got me to thinking, and as I talked about rumors, gossiping, backbiting, naysaying, and all of those things, it brought a question to mind. Maybe in the comments, you can help to clarify this for me. But why do you think no one likes to be gossiped about? yet they take pleasure in gossiping about other people. Selah. All right, so that put me in the mind of how about what would happen if we were to become the change that we want to see in relation to backbiting and naysaying, speaking word curses, speaking negative things, repeating negative things, spreading rumors, gossiping, etc. Now, it talks about speaking blessings, and basically, the scripture came to mind in Deuteronomy, the Old Testament book of Deuteronomy, chapter 30, verse 19. And it basically lets you know that you and I, you, me, we have a choice to make. All right, between life and death and blessings and cursings. Literally, it says, "This day I call the heavens and the earth as witness against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessings and cursings. Now there's a recommendation. Now choose life, so that you and your children may live." So you and I have a choice to make. Why? Because God has given us free will. We're not clones. We're not robots. We have minds of our own, and we can make decisions, right? So we're going to continue to move. So it's important to know and to note that whatever we bless increases, and whatever we curse decreases. All right. So change your confession. Change the words of your mouth. If you're not satisfied, if you're not happy or content with what you're seeing in your life, change the confession of your mouth. All right. So the second of the 3 power tools is curses from childhood. So it's important to know and to note that people are affected by word curses spoken to them as children, based on things other children say, family members say, teachers say, or anyone says. People fail to realize how powerful words are and the trauma that they can inflict upon others. A child's identity is greatly influenced by word curses. So this trauma is not exclusive to children or young people. All of us respond to the power of words. Words can have a lasting impact. Word curses are demonic and require both deliverance and healing. They work together. Now, this calls me to think about the fact that bullies do this intentionally. They understand that you can attack a person's identity. They understand that if you continue to tell a person that they're this, they're that, you treat them as such, then eventually, if they are not careful, or if the Lord does not intervene, they will begin to develop the victim mindset where they feel unworthy. They're not worthy of anything good in life. They're inadequate. They're incompetent, or whatever, or what have you, because it's like you've driven that point home. It's like hammering something over and over and over and over into someone's soul, into someone's mind. And we know that the gateways to our soul is the way, is our eyes, the way you see, the way they see themselves being treated by others and other peers or teachers, like they said, family members, other strangers, the things they hear spoken about them, the word curses that go forth or what have you. And one of the things is when you're a child, you may not even have the vocabulary to verbalize or to speak or to come against what's being spoken to you. Think about the unfair advantage of an adult over a child, because adults are usually stronger, they're usually bigger, they have authority and or positions of authority over the child. So if you are standing there and you're cursing out a child, what recourse do they have? What can they do? What can they say? And if they do say or do something that you do not like, then are you going to physically restrain them or physically, assault them because they spoke up or said that you're lying or I'm not that or whatever, I don't want to hear it, or don't say that about me, or don't say that to me, don't talk to me like that, whatever, what have you. Now, in no way am I saying that a child should, curse out an adult or should be disrespectful or what have you, but just realistically, respect goes both ways. So if you're disrespecting a child, and I'm not saying that they should disrespect you back, but I am saying as a child, how would you feel if you were being verbally assaulted or what have you by an adult? What recourse would you have? What would be your reaction or response? Just something to think about. And we're going to go to the third of the power tools, and it's traumatic memories. Memories are another way of the human mind that need healing. Okay, so memories are like a slideshow or a visual file stored deep in the recesses of our consciousness. Consciousness is just your mind, something that you're conscious of. That means you're aware of it. Okay, you're aware that it happened, when it happened, how it happened. You may have extremely vivid memories or even flashbacks of something that happened, traumatic memories. Okay, now it could be an act of abuse, violence, betrayal, death, pain. These all leave traumatic residue associated with the event. Now, sometimes hearing a song, smelling a scent, of a particular aroma. It could be someone's cologne or perfume or something that smells identical. Maybe somebody else has on that cologne or perfume or whatever, and it takes you back to a time where you had an encounter, a negative encounter with someone, and they smelled like that. Or a song was playing on the radio, or maybe they sang a song or whatever or what have you, but it can take you back because of the reminder of the traumatic memory that's in your mind, right? It can be a certain word that can cause you to recall a traumatic memory. It could be somebody saying a certain word to you or speaking to you in a certain tone. Maybe they raised their voice and it brings you back to that time when somebody raised their voice and did something to you that was traumatic in your opinion. Okay. So it's important to know and to note that memories surface and that they can flood you with paralyzing emotions. So it's almost like sometimes we see in movies where adults have had traumatic experiences, traumatic childhoods or whatever, what have you. And even as an adult, it could be, let's say you're testifying on the stand in front of, a jury of your peers or other adults or whatever, what have you. And they take you back to a place or a memory where maybe you were younger or you were a child or what have you. And you began to be that child again because it literally takes you back. You can maybe see the layout of the house. You can see somebody coming towards you or what is about to happen. And you're telling about it because maybe, like I said, you're testifying about it or whatever or what have you. But it takes you back to that place. And that trauma, has a way it can trap you if, deliverance and healing does not take place, and healing specifically for those traumatic memories, because they can become intrusive. They can pretty much take on a life of their own where you're not even thinking about that. You're doing something, trying to keep your mind off of it, or you could be doing something fun, yet, like I said, a visual. It just plays across the big computer of your screen. It's a slideshow. It's a visual. It just comes up and out of nowhere, even when unprovoked, or what have you. So it's important to know and to note traumatic memories can be suppressed or repressed. Now, what is the difference? I wanted to know and I looked it up. So as it pertains to something that is suppressed, it is something to prevent the development, action, or expression or restrain. So sometimes when trauma happens, your mind will almost shut off that part of what happened, or like make it dark or turn off the lights to that part or whatever, what have you. So it's preventing, it from being even more traumatic to you by, causing it to go way, way, way back in the recesses of your mind to the point where you don't even remember it. Now, things that are suppressed actually still come up at some point in time or what have you, but it could be years, and then it comes back up and you're like, I didn't even remember that, like, or whatever, or what have you. Now, repressed, what does that mean and how is it different? Repressed basically means anything that's unconscious and is inhibited as well as oppressed. So something that's stuffed down. Now, it's not as pushed as far back as the suppressed memories, but it has been pushed down so that it's not immediately recallable or whatever, what have you. When they talk about inhibited, that means something that is stopped, something that is prevented or what have you. But as I talked about early about the pity party posse, let's say you're smoking and you're drinking and you're engaging and experimenting in all of these controlled substances or whatever, and we know that those things they take away your inhibitions or your fears or whatever, what have you. You might become as bold as you can be, but you're usually a hermit. You're usually quiet. You don't really talk to a lot of people. You may stay isolated and stay to yourself, yet you get some liquid courage in you. And that's why they call it that. Now you're just courageous. You're talking to everybody. You're in everybody's face. You want to cuss folk out. You want to fight, even though you can't really fight or whatever, what have you. So these substances are not only are they gateways and a legal way to access the spirit world, but they also take your inhibitions down. They decrease them. And sometimes maybe even potentially take them away while you're still under the influence of that controlled substance. It's important to know and to note that emotions can unlock hidden and suppressed pain. So experiencing that emotion again, let's say you were humiliated as a child, and let's say it's been 20, 30 years. You are humiliated on some other level as an adult, but that may take you right back to that first initial experience with humiliation as a child. So that's just an example. And it's important to know and to note that oftentimes the people experiencing the pain run from it because, it's natural and normal. It's a human reaction. That's why they have the fight, flight, or freeze or whatever, what have you. You're going to avoid it or you're going to confront it, So it's important to know and to note that we're wired to run from things that cause pain or that have the potential to cause pain. For example, if you're afraid that you're going to get bit by a dog, you might take off running because you're trying to avoid the pain of being bit or attacked by that dog, right? So it's basically telling us, hey, the area of traumatic memories, that's not something you need to do. You don't need to run from it. For example, if you begin having flashbacks, if you begin, the visual slideshow begins to come on and you begin to, visualize things and past traumas, it's time to deal with it. That's an indication, a red light or a red flag saying, hey, I'm still in here. What you gonna do about it? Basically. So it's important not to run because obviously you've been running in some way, shape, or form, whether you suppressed it way back or whether you repressed it by pushing it down a little bit. So it's not on the surface or what have you. So it's time to confront and deal with those things. That's why they're coming up. It's important to know and to note that we need the healing power of Jesus to come on the scene and wipe out the pain. We can and will be healed if we allow Jesus into the vulnerable places in our lives. So it's important to know and to note that. And it basically talks about the woman at the well. And it talks about how she had 5 previous broken or ruptured relationships. And she was in her 6th relationship and he wasn't her husband either. So basically you've been in relationship with multiple males or people of the opposite sex. Nobody has seen the value in you enough to make you their wife, but they have seen the value, I guess, in having sex with you and whatever that looked like for you in that relationship with those individuals, right? So it's important to know and to note that. It talked about her being stuck in the cycle of broken relationships. How many of us have found ourselves stuck in the cycle of broken relationships and would actually admit, that we were stuck in the cycle of broken relationships? And take responsibility for our role in that. All right. So basically she had deep emotional damage from all of these ruptured relationships. It's important to know and to note that Jesus pinpointed her wound. Okay. He asked her about the most vulnerable area, your relationships, who you allow in your space. And what have they done for you? What have they done to you? Now, she opened up the tender wounds and let the Son of God pour living water into her. And it's important to know and to note that her bondage was deeper than just having an adultery issue or a sin issue. It was something within her. Her soul was hurting. Her soul was crying out. Her soul was wounded. Okay. There was a broken place deep inside of her emotions that kept the recurring cycle of bad relationships. And once again, it could be because she did not feel worthy of a better relationship. She felt, well, this is my lot in life. This is what has happened the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth time. So let's go ahead and do number 6 because that's basically what happens. What relationships look like for me. or what have you. Now, it's also important to know and to note that the suffering that she experienced left her unable to give and receive love. She was damaged in that area or in those areas, and or commitment. So she may have resolved that, let's say number 6 or whoever wanted to marry her. She might say, I don't want to get married. I don't want to be anybody's wife, blah, blah, blah. Now, at some point she may have wanted to, but once that doesn't happen, like it talked about disappointed, limiting your dreams and all of that, prior past disappointments, then, as a desire to want to be in control. No, you want to marry me? No, I don't want to be married. Because, feeling sometimes when you experience rejection repeatedly over and over and over, you get a sense of power being the one to reject someone else as opposed to receiving rejection for someone else. You feel like, well, I rejected him. He didn't reject me this time or that time or whatever, what have you. So it's important to know and to note that. Also, understand that Jesus opened up her wound when she let him in. So ask yourself, am I willing to let Jesus into those broken places, those secret places, the things that I want to cover, the things that I have way back in the corner and I've got something in front of it so you don't even know it's there? You have to be willing to let him in. There has to be a desperation in deliverance. And I did a previous episode. You have to get to a certain point where you're willing to bust a move. You're willing to take a risk. You're willing to be vulnerable enough to uncover yourself in this area and say, I have something here. I have something here. I've been hurt here. I've been wounded here. Right? So when she let him in, he healed her. And then she began to evangelize and tell everybody about the encounter that she had, which was a radical transformation. Think about somebody that is so downtrodden, probably depressed and all of these things, and they're completely full of joy simply because of an encounter, a conversation that they had with somebody, to the point where they're like recommending him to everybody, or you need to come see the man who told me all about my life, who told me things that he should not have known or whatever, what have you. So it's important to know and to note that. Also, the New Testament book of Romans chapter 2, verse 11 talks about God having no respecter of person. So if he did it for her, he's willing to do it for you, me, we, anybody that asks, anybody that's vulnerable enough to say, right here is where it hurts. Here is where the most damage has been done or whatever, or what have you. Now, it's also important to know and to note that in Matthew chapter 5, verse 45, it talks about how Jesus, or God, who's Jesus as well, reigns on the just as well as the unjust. So that goes back to the no respecter of person. He desires to see us as his children healed, delivered, and set free. We just have to desire it enough for ourselves to believe that we are adequate enough to receive it, are not incompetent, are worthy enough, and we are worthy to have a better quality of life than what we've settled for or what we are currently settling for, right? So we're going to go into depression and anxiety, which have to do with emotional turmoil. And then we're going to briefly, because time is getting away, and then we're going to call it an episode, and then we'll pick back up with, I guess, episode 3 of soul trauma healing. And I don't want to rush through this. And initially I was like, Lord, how many, sessions or how many episodes is this going to be? Because I didn't know initially that this was going to turn into a soul trauma series, but it has. But I understand and know that this is for who it's for. And it's not for who it's not for. But if this is where you are, you may need someone to slow walk you through all of the emotions, slow walk you through what is it to be in a toxic relationship? How does it begin? How do I get out of it? Why am I, what does it look like when you're in it? And you may be able to see, it's almost like having a mirror that, hey, this is where I am. Like, how did I find myself here or whatever, or what have you? So I'm not going to breeze by or whatever, what have you. Now, if I have a previous episode where I've gone more deep or gotten to the root of some other things that are relevant, and I don't really have to, I can kind of glaze over it or what have you and refer you to that episode or that series, then I will do so in the interest of time. But I don't want to rush past anything because there are individuals that are dealing with this. Like, this is right where they are. It pinpoints their exact plot on the map of life, so to speak. Let's talk about depression. So, depression is a struggle that many believers and non believers face, believe it or not. So, maybe you're not as alone as you thought you were. Okay. Just a few came to mind when I thought about this. The warrior king, David, struggled with depression. Read the book of Psalms where he talks about, his tears being his food and his drink, because that means he's crying so much. You've cried to the point where a tear will drop in your mouth or whatever, what have you. So that's but basically what he's saying. He's been crying so much that basically was his drink, his food, or what have you. It has to do with depression. Okay. As well as Elijah, after he did the great thing on the mount where the fire of God came down and consumed all of the sacrifice and everything like that, and all of the false prophets of Baal were eradicated. Then he was running from Jezebel because she verbally threatened him. She spoke a word curse and said, basically, I'm going to kill you. Now, that's about the most powerful, heavy word curse you can say to somebody is, I'm going to take your life. You finna be unalive when I get through with you, or what have you. So he ran away, and basically he was depressed and everything like that. And asking the Lord, why did you allow me to be alive? He basically wanted to say it, take my life, like suicidal or whatever, what have you, or homicidal, didn't want to live anymore. As well as Job. Everybody always talks about how have the patience of Job, be faithful like Job. And Job was that. Yet when you read the story for yourself, he talks about it would be better if I wasn't born. So, yes, he was patient, and, he's human. So I'm not saying that he's a bad person or he should have stuck it out better or done anything any different. Had I been in his situation, I have no idea what might have come out of my mouth after losing so much or whatever. When you have a lot and then you lose a lot, you're being stripped. Then you get down to the joint, the marrow, and the bone of who you really are. So anyway, those are just 3 examples, and I'm sure you can think of many more, because once again, a lot of times it's a part of the process, especially when you have a prophetic call on your life or whatever, or what have you. So we're going to move forward, and basically it's saying depression is a mood disorder, and it's marked especially by sadness, inactivity, difficulty in thinking and concentrating, and significant increase or decrease in appetite. So either you eat too much or you don't eat anything or very little. And as a result, people either gain a lot of weight or they lose a lot of weight. And time spent sleeping. Same. You either sleep a lot or you can't sleep at all. Okay? Feelings of dejection and hopelessness, and sometimes suicidal tendencies, a state of feeling sad and dejected. Now, it's important to know and to note that, like, look at that checklist. Have you felt this way? Are you gaining and losing weight? Is your sleep fluctuating and all up and down or whatever, what have you? Are you inactive, like you don't want to get out of the bed? You hate to get up to go to the bathroom because you'd rather just sleep your life away, or you'd rather just be asleep so you're unconscious of what's going on, so you don't have to think about whatever is happening if you're in crisis or whatever is going on in your life currently, or whatever you might be worrying about. Because once again, a lot of the things that we worry about never transpire, right? So basically being sad, and this could be due to grief and loss. It could be due to perceived grief and loss. Let's say, let's take a page from the woman at the well. Let's say this is your 6th relationship. No, let's say 5th. This is your 5th relationship, and now it's over. So now you're sad, you're depressed, you don't want to get out of the bed, you're overeating or undereating, you're not taking care of yourself, you're not sleeping, or you're sleeping too much, and you're feeling inadequate, you're feeling incompetent, you're feeling like you're not worthy of anything, you're worthless, you're feeling like you're not worthy of a good or better quality of life, because something must be wrong with me, because this is the 5th person that has left me, or they haven't married me, or they haven't committed to me, or whatever, or what have you. Just an example. So it's important to know that there is a difference in experience a bout of depression and grappling with the effects of ongoing depression. These are 2 different things. Okay. In both of these situations, there's a sense of lethargy, which basically means you don't have energy. It's almost like fatigue. It's like I don't want to get out of bed. I'm not going to. I don't have the strength. I don't want to shower. I don't want to put on clothes. Like, that's just not something I'm going to do or willing to do, right? Disconnection. You might see your phone ringing and you know your mama calling to check on you, pray with you, whatever, what have you, and you just turn the phone off. You don't want to connect with anybody. You don't want to go on social media. You don't want to answer anybody's call. Everybody going straight to voicemail or what have you. And tremendous sadness. You're just sad. You may not even know the source of it. You just don't feel happy. You feel down. I liken depression as like being in a deep, dark, black hole, because you feel like nobody can reach you, and you feel like, nothing nobody can do is going to improve the situation or whatever or what have you. So you feel isolated, even if you're self-isolating. Like I said, you're disconnected. You're not answering phone calls. Somebody might come over. You don't want to talk to them. You pretend like you're not home. You're not answering the door. You're not answering calls. You're not engaging. You're disconnecting. And honestly, this is typically a time when, if you're not careful and the Lord doesn't intervene, suicidal ideation, because you're disconnecting. Like, you feel like, I don't have a reason for being here. You know what I'm saying? My family can do nothing to help. Yeah, they're here, but what can they do? Like, this situation is too intense. It's too big for them. It's too big for me. I'm just ready to check out. So, just real life examples, right? There's a spiritual component to these situations in lieu of depression that demands deliverance. Okay. Now, it's important to know that depression is a common byproduct of lack of purpose. So that means if and when you don't have purpose or know what on earth you're here for, then you can get depressed. It's fairly common. Now, each person is created with a unique purpose. It's important to know and to note that, right? And your personalities speak to your purpose, your hopes, your dreams, and your calling. All of these are intertwined with your purpose. God created you specifically with what you have to do what he's called you to do, with the ability and everything, right? But if and when you don't know this, then you feel like, what on earth am I here for? So it's important to know and to note that the realization and discovery of individual destiny breathes life into a person. So if you are grappling or struggling with depression, it could be because you don't understand your value. You don't understand how worthy you are. You don't understand your worth to this world. You don't understand how adequate you actually are. You don't understand how competent you are in certain areas or whatever, what have you. You don't understand how God has designed you. He's fearfully and wonderfully made you. And if and when you don't understand that, you might feel like you're a mistake or I don't fit in anywhere. Maybe the places where you're trying to fit in, you're not supposed to fit in. That's why you don't fit in anywhere. Maybe God didn't create you to fit in those areas. Maybe he created you to stick out. Maybe he created you uniquely and you haven't quite embraced that. You may feel like, I have no point of reference. Nobody else feels like I do. Nobody else has the type of dreams or sees the things that I see. Maybe in the spirit world or in the natural, people don't visualize or perceive like I do. I dress different. I talk different. I walk different. I think different. I just am different. And when you don't understand the value of you being different, the value of you being unique, the value of you being rare, the value of there not being a lot of people like you, the value of there not being one person that's just like you. Even if you're an identical twin, you have different fingerprints. So you're different on purpose. That's why we as a people have different shades of skin, different types of hair. We have different body shapes, or what have different personality, different talents, different abilities, different capabilities, different mental capacities, or whatever, or what have you. So it's important to know and to note that to Father God, you are unique. You fearfully and wonderfully made. You have a purpose. You're created that way on purpose, for a purpose, or whatever, what have you. This last scripture comes from the Old Testament book of Jeremiah, chapter 29, verse 11. One of my favorites. And it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans for welfare and not for calamity." That means it's good and not bad. It's positive and not evil, or what have you. to give you a future. So a future is not now, it's coming, it's forthcoming, and a hope. So you hope for the future when you know there is a future. When you don't know that there is a future, then you feel like where you are is where you're gonna be, where you're gonna stay, and there's nothing greater than this, that's gonna come out of this. So that's how you can find yourself stuck in the pit, the deep, dark pit of depression, because you don't understand that there's light at the end of the tunnel, or whatever, what have you. You're encompassed with all of this darkness and all this negativity and all of this worrying and stress and all of these things, yet you don't understand that on the other side of this, like the song says, there will be glory after this. So that's future. That's hope for the future. But if you get so stuck and stagnated and you're not moving where you are, then you don't understand. It's almost like being in a storm. You're either about to go into a storm, you're currently in the midst of a storm, or you're leaving out of the storm. If you get stuck inside the storm, then you won't be able to see the sun shining a few miles down the road, or a few hours later, or a few weeks later, or months, or years, or whatever, or what have you. So it's important to keep going. It's important to keep the faith. It's important to keep your mind stayed on him, on God. And he's going to keep you in perfect peace, as the word of God says. When we review or think about all of these things, victim mentality, this kind of mindset, this kind of perspective, it all starts right here. So if and when we renew our mind daily, renew means to make new, and re means again, make it new again. And sometimes during the day, it has to be repetitive, depending on how much stinking thinking you got going on up there or what have you. But it's important to know that God loves you, and he did not create you to be depressed. He did not create you to be hopeless. He did not create you to be helpless. He did not create you to give up. He did not create you to take yourself out or somebody else out. He did not create you for those things. He created you, as we said in the previous scripture, to choose life and not death, to choose blessing and not cursing. He gave you the recommendation, therefore choose life. And then he said that not only you, but your children shall live. So this thing is bigger than you. It doesn't just stop with you. You have a future. You just have to stay in the race. You have to continue to press toward the mark, and you will get there. So I hope and pray that this was encouragement to you, as it was encouragement to me. I want you to know that God, and only God, has the final say so about where you are now, where you have been, and where you are going, because you're simply in the process of becoming who and what God created, he ordained, designed, destined, and purposed you to be for his kingdom and for his glory. Until next time, miracles and blessings today and every day.